Ray and Lexica Elhoun, who and other people who were absent on the date of Wednesday, May 3rd.
All right. Thank you, 8th graders. Okay, everybody please get out your homework.
We didn't have any homework.
Right, you didn't have any homework today, so you don't have to get out homework. So I will tell you what your homework is. Lesson 81, South Africa, these note cards. Raise your hand if you already completed them. And keep your hand up if you also showed them to me and I sent you the note cards. I sent your mom, yeah.
Wait, if we show it to you now in class?
If you show them to me now and I remember, I will do it. But yes, you should show them to me. Show them to me or send me a picture so I can get the note card spreadsheet to you so you can study for your test. You will get a take-home test on Monday. It will be due back on Wednesday, and this is the final test of the year.
What are we
There
doing
you
after
guys.
this? Are we just doing?
Oh, we have lots after that. I might even quiz you after that, but yes. Okay, you also have your last map quiz on Monday, Africa Part 2. Africa Part 2. And then today, in just a minute, we will, click through that. Who's going to be the person who's going to practice this? Sam and Matt, have y'all already done this?
Not this
I
year.
sort of did it. I was in the first when I did Hard No Borders.
That is counts.
Yeah, that
doesn't
and
count.
didn't you do it badly?
No, I actually got like.
You got better than me.
I did better than Ben when he
All
was
right,
doing it.
I'll let Matt and Sam do it. That's fine. Okay, guys. Today in class, we're going to talk about what has happened in America that's connected to the civil rights issues since the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed. So we're going to sort of catch up with a focus on Richmond, Virginia, but we're going to talk also generally about America. Mm-hmm.
And that was granting like Black African American people rights.
Yes.
Did that also include
No. Civil Rights Act was not. It was generally male and female. But we're gonna review that in just a minute. But first, we're going to start here. Can you cut the lights, Matt? I want everybody to take a moment to silently read this prayer to yourself. Think about what it means, and then we're going to read it together. Okay, read it out loud with me, everybody together. We pray, Lord, that you will right all the wrongs that are taking place in our world and vindicate those that are being treated unjustly. Amen. All right, we'll circle back to that, but first, Africa. And I am going to tell you a few more fun facts about Africa, the countries that start with a Z. Yes?
Should we write these down? Because last time we had it as extra credits. So should we write
Well, no. I figure you'll remember something I said.
I don't remember anything yet.
I remember.
Like
All
that
right,
means
no.
extra credit
Let me
again.
tell you about the Z's. What is it, Madeline? What about the map?
Will it be the map quizzes that we did in the beginning of the year, or will it be like the last one we did where it's like multiple?
I cannot answer that because I haven't made it up yet. I will decide based off of the reason I did the multiple choice last time is because I wanted it to be fast. I oftentimes like you guys to do the other kind because I like you writing out the words. So no, I don't care about that. I just like it when you write out the words. But let me tell you a little bit about the Z's. Zambia and Zimbabwe. Look at the shape of Zambia, and I'm going to tell you just briefly about Zambia. That Zambia is a country where termite hills can grow so big that they're as large as a small house, and a house big enough that a pony could fit inside. So just try to imagine a termite hill large enough to house a pony.
You don't have a picture.
The pictures will be amazing.
Wait, do you have a picture on this?
I do not, no. I just looked up fun facts. The country's name, Zambia, comes from the 4th largest river in Africa, which is the Zambezi River. Isn't that a great name?
Not from all the
Zambezi
zombies
River.
that live there?
Nope, Zambezi. Yes.
Do you know the size of the pony?
It was a small pony. It did say a small pony could be inside of that house. So a house with a small pony, a hill that size. You'll just have to use your imagination. Another thing about Zambia River is that Victoria Falls is on the border of Zambia and Zimbabwe. You guys know Victoria Falls, right? Very wide, it's very huge, it's very astonishingly amazing. In Zambia, they call Victoria Falls smoke that thunders. It's a pretty good description. Smoke that thunders. So Victoria Falls is also on the border of Zimbabwe. And I'm going to tell you a few facts about Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, the people hold a firm, strong belief that mermaids exist and that they are responsible for everything that goes wrong. Mermaids. So like if somebody gets murdered, it was the mermaids. That's why it happened.
Wow.
Mhm.
I find that funny because they're not even touching any water.
Don't even know where the mermaids come from. Are there mermaids in the falls? I don't know.
They live underground.
No, that's so. Also in Zimbabwe, the economy is really poor. You need to know that before I tell you this next fact. Boys, if you want to take a girl out and she wants to go someplace that's really expensive, you need to take her to a gas station. That is really, really expensive in Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, an entire wheelbarrow full of money could buy a loaf of bread or a few tomatoes of their money, which means money is really undervalued and the economy really suffers. Yes?
Okay, that's like Russia when it was like
That's what we say, like when economies are completely imploding, that the money becomes almost worthless.
Also, are they like regular gas stations or are they like nice gas stations?
Not nice gas stations. And still it would be a good
Well,
date
like,
place.
Some gas stations are nice.
Well, okay.
Like
In
Buc-ee's,
America,
that
we
place is
have a
really
new
good.
Sheets going in our neighborhood. That might be a destination place one day, but I don't think we're talking about Sheets going into, with made to order going into Zimbabwe. Yeah. Okay. I just told you about how bad the economy is in Zimbabwe, which is going to make the next fun fact all the more striking. Zimbabwe is known for having the largest platinum and diamond reserves in the world. Probably a lot of the people in Zimbabwe work in these diamond mines and work producing this, and they are some of the poorest people in the world. All right, last fun fact about Zimbabwe is that Zimbabwe has only ever earned 8 Olympic medals. 1 medal was in field hockey, and the other 7 were all this one female swimmer who was really good, so she earned 7 Olympic medals. And that's it. That's all the medals that Zimbabwe has to their name. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, this is slightly off, but like, what place was it that had the oldest skeleton?
It was Eritrea. Yep. Okay, who is coming to do this? Matt, are you first?
Yes.
Matt is going to click through. Remember, this is your last review on the map quiz. So pay attention to all the fun facts can help you remember. You don't need a fun fact for Madagascar.
Yeah, we do.
Central African Republic is right in the center. The Republic of the Congo is next to the DRC. Cameroon, where the exploding lakes were. Uganda, Gabon, the French/Portuguese colony. Botswana, Somalia, looks like a Pac-Man. Tanzania, the DRC, Zambia, we just talked about. Kenya, with all the fast runners. Eritrea.
Nope.
Is up a little bit. Ethiopia, beautiful, beautiful Ethiopia. Angola, moneybags, the wealthy place. Namibia, South Africa, and South Sudan. And Mozambique. 7 on the flag? Yes. Next person. What's your?
Oh, will you tell us what type of quiz it is before the quiz?
Nope. Sorry.
Where?
Eritrea.
No, where's the button that lets me restart? I'm already 19
So
seconds
I'll
in.
go
It
down.
doesn't matter. Eritrea, Kenya,
We'll start you at 20.
Botswana, Mozambique, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Central African Republic, Madagascar, Namibia, Uganda, DRC, Gabon, South Sudan, Angola, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Somalia, Cameroon, and South Africa. There you go. Good job, guys. Yes, Ben? Okay. Guys, today we are going to be talking about what happened after this, after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I am going to tell you a few stories that Matt, can you turn the lights back on? That helped to lead this, of what led up to this. Yes.
Okay, this probably has nothing to do with it, but Lyndon B. Johnson was the one that came back here for Kennedy, right?
Yes. He was the VP
So,
for Kennedy.
do you think that Kennedy would have passed the civil rights?
In fact, that's where I was going to start. I was going to start by saying that Kennedy was the one who was trying to pass the Civil Rights Act. And it actually passed under Lyndon B. Johnson. But Kennedy had tried to do it. There was a lot of trouble with getting the Civil Rights Act to pass. Now, it wasn't because there weren't enough senators to vote on it. There were enough people that were going to vote and pass it into law. It's because at the time our government had a way in place that if people really didn't want a law to pass, they could do something to stop the law from passing. And the something is called a filibuster. Has anyone ever heard of a filibuster?
Yes, I didn't know what it meant, but
Okay. A filibuster is kind of a crazy way for a minority group of senators to stop a law from passing. And Sam, this might be something that you would enjoy more than anything if you ever got to be a senator, because the way they stop the bill from passing is to talk and to not stop talking. To talk so long that they hope to just wear out the other side and get the other side to give up and not want to pass the bill.
I think I would be good at that.
Well, listen to how they did it. When the group, the minority group that did not want the civil rights law, the civil rights bill to pass, when they filibustered for 54 days. Now, with a filibuster, you don't get to take a break at night. It's 24 hours a day. Why? Because if you ever stop talking, then the other side gets to call a vote and be like, okay, now it's our turn, let's have a vote. So they have to talk 24 hours a day as long as they're filibustering.
that is horrible.
Day and night in the Senate chambers, and you're trying to just wear out the other side by doing this. Exactly. You don't even have to talk about anything on topic. You just have to talk. You have to talk. And what they would do is whoever was talking, after the person wanted to stop, the person has to yield the floor. If they yield it back to the speaker, the one who's in charge, then the speaker can pass it to the other side. But if they yield it to their buddy who's going to help with this filibuster, then their buddy just starts doing the talking. So they just got a group of people together that all didn't want the Civil Rights Act to pass. And they talked for 54 days.
So they just talked about random things.
You can open up, this is the famous thing that people do, is that they open the dictionary and read it.
Are you serious? That is so horrible.
Just,
And there's
they
nothing
just
you can do
read.
to stop it.
Nothing you can do procedurally to stop it. Nothing. They just get to talk until they stop talking.
So they just talked for
54 days.
straight.
54
How many
days
people
straight.
were there?
Well, I mean, a lot of people will just be like, but so the question is, how badly does the other side want to pass a bill? Are they going to stay in there too to hope that like 2 a.m. you quit so that we can take it? But then you have to, well, at least at the time you had to have, the other senators had to be present. So they had to actually physically be there in order to vote. So maybe there were enough votes to pass the Civil Rights Act, but those people had to be present in order to vote that way. The very last person who talked in the filibuster is a name that you know. He was not a Virginia senator, he was a West Virginia senator by the name of Robert Byrd, B-Y-R-D.
Yeah.
Where have you heard that?
Bird theater.
Byrd Theater, or Byrd Middle School, yeah, which has recently had its name changed, I think, because Robert Byrd was known primarily for trying to promote Jim Crow laws, racism, and it was a super famous family. The Byrd family was a big political family in Virginia. They had a lot of power. But he has, in the renaming that's happened in our city, he got himself renamed. Yes.
Aren't the Irvins related?
They might be. I don't know.
And that your mom's related?
All right. So eventually it passed, and it was signed into law by Lyndon B. Johnson. That is, by the way, the first blank on your handout that you have right there. Lyndon Johnson, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Before we go to the next blank, I want to see a review. This is an old note card, and I want to see if you remember something you've already been tested on. What? This is not on the blanks. It's not on blanks.
Lyndon B. Johnson.
Lyndon Johnson, 1964. What did the Civil Rights Act of 1964 promote? Madeline.
Well, wasn't it more jobs for people in the cities? No,
You're missing, like, there was something that was really at the heart of it.
voting rights?
No, not yet. Yes.
It was equality in like parks, schools, theaters, all the like public places.
Yes, public place, equality in public places. So this was the ending of Jim Crow segregation, promoting equalities, and this was this was officially the desegregating of schools, hotels, factories, restaurants, water fountains, you name it, like that sort of thing. Now, you might have been thinking about this. What did the Civil Rights Act of 1964 not yet address? Most of these got addressed by laws later, but what, Micah?
Housing issues, money, and something else.
By money, you mean like the
Like a lot of the black people poor.
poverty issues. So housing, poverty, and the last one, voting. Right. So the voting is going to come up later. These things did get addressed in later legislation, but what we're going to focus on today is not the voting rights stuff, but the housing issues. Poverty is way too big too, because it's so general how all these other things are part of what promotes systems that make it hard for people to get out of poverty. Yes?
Have you heard about the thing where certain African American families and living in certain facilities can get like reimbursed?
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that right now though, because we're not going that far into the future. All right, we got to talk about what happened between 1964 and then more recently. Okay, so eventually what the Civil Rights Act did was gave the government power. It didn't solve all of that stuff like we said, but it gave the government power to prevent racial discrimination, write this in the blank, Matt, in employment, in voting, and the use of public facilities like schools. Employment and voting. Guys, this passed in law. This effectively ended Jim Crow laws, and yet a lot of governments did not actually make the changes for a while. There were some school systems that didn't actually integrate for 10 years after 1964. So it was maybe up to 1974 before some of the schools actually integrated. And when they did, it was still really contentious, and you've read probably some stuff about this. It was a big deal. This is also when busing happened. Lois is going to tell us a little bit about busing when she does her presentation, because that's what she interviewed her father about an experience he had with busing. But let me give you sort of the overview idea. Today, and back then, in public schools, you went to the public school in your neighborhood, right? You guys are tracking? You go in your neighborhood. Most of the kids in your neighborhoods, they go to public schools, hop on a bus, and they go to something that's relatively close, unless they get into a specialty center. They go to some place in their neighborhood. What busing did is that it looked at it and it said, the neighborhoods are segregated. If we keep public schools in the neighborhood, there will never be desegregation in the public schools, because your neighborhood school will only have black students in it or white students in it. So the only way to require integration is if we send people from one part of town to schools across the way, and then vice versa, and then back. Like, basically, bus kids, not 5 minutes, but 45 minutes across the town. And then the kids that were bused were minorities in the schools. There were social problems. For the black kids coming into the white schools, a lot of times it was argued with angry parents outside, kids getting bullied. For the white kids going to the black schools, a lot of times they're like, why are there no labs in these schools? Why do I not have clubs? There was a lot of reasons people were discontent with the busing. But you see what the system existed to do. It existed to force integration among young people who would then grow up and not think in a way where they thought their world should be so racially segregated. By the 1980s, people were fed up with it, and they ended busing. And it went back, public schools went back to just regular neighborhood schools. So what Lois is going to tell us about is when her dad was actually part of a school system where he was being bused to other schools. But this was a big part of what was happening during this time. Integration and busing. So the laws change. Does that change people? Do their hearts change because the laws change? No. There was still a lot of problems that were inside of people, which means that racial fears and racial discrimination didn't just go away because the law changed. What happened to it? Where does it sort of morph and then poof, pop up again? And these are the 4 areas we're going to talk about today. Where people live, where they go to school, who they know, kind of like what opportunities they have, and whether they end up incarcerated in prison or living a flourishing life. The who they know, this is me just reminding you that you are probably going to get your first couple of jobs, at least your first job, because of who your parents know, or somebody at church, or some connection that you have. Most young people get a chance, they get their start, because other people know your family and are willing to give you an opportunity. But what happens if you're not in a very resourced area? If the people that you know and that you know you don't have money, don't own businesses, don't have any opportunities to give you, you're not going to get the same opportunities. So who you know does make a big difference. So that's the topic for today. Okay. And we're going to start right here with the next blank. What I want you to write into the blank, and then I'm going to show you some actual pictures here. It is called redlining. The color red and the word lining all blended together. Redlining, a process by which banks or other institutions refuse to offer mortgages, or they offer them at really high rates, to customers in certain neighborhoods based on their race. It's one of the clearest examples of institutionalized racism in the history of the United States. Racism is the second of the blanks in that paragraph. Okay, so you wrote down redlining, and you wrote down racism, and then Matt is going to turn off the lights. And I'm going to show you this first picture right here is a redlining map from New Orleans, but I'm going to show you Richmond in just a minute. I'm showing you this one just to explain to you how redlining worked. Oh, I got to ask you a question first. Do you guys know what a mortgage is? Yeah. So you understand that nobody has $500,000 sitting around to buy a new house. That instead, if your for most of you, if your parents own a house, they probably put some money down to the house, and then the bank gave them a loan, and they have to pay it back with some interest. They pay it back over 15 years or 20 years or 30 years, which means that most of the time, at least the time you're growing up in this house, your parents won't fully own it, but at some point, if they stay in the same house, they'll eventually own the house full outright. That's called a mortgage, and it's how most people do buying houses. Mm-hmm.
Can you pay the bank before the...
You can. If you have a big rush of cash and you don't want to have a mortgage anymore, you can pay off the bank. But a lot of people think a mortgage is not a bad way to do that, so a lot of people will take that kind of cash and put it into something else, a retirement account or something like that, or an investment.
Okay, and can you, does that complicate it if you move before your mortgage?
No, because when you move, you sell the house, so you get back enough, or you should get back enough to pay off the whole mortgage and then have extra money to put toward your next house. So it's actually a great way to buy a new or different or better house, because you just take all the money you made. Now, you didn't make $500,000, but maybe now you have, you've paid off the whole house and you have another $100,000 left over. You put that into the next house, you take a mortgage out on it, and so you continue to build up stuff. It is one of the best ways for people to have kind of stabilize their future, is home ownership. Owning a home is an important way in America to keep your finances stable, which is what makes this lesson so interesting and so important. Yes?
So we have a friend family that the Van Lessers. Yeah, they their family, what they do for a living is basically buy houses and then rent them out to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually gotten them enough money that they've built their own house.
Yes.
And it's huge.
Right. And there are definitely people who hi Dad. You can sit right here in the back.
I'm at, right here.
You can, here's a chair for you. There are definitely people, thank you, Marianne,
You're welcome.
who do that. But we're talking in general, most people, their goal or their desire would be home ownership. All right, so in 1934, starting in 1934, the government, our very own government, created residential security maps to help determine what parts of town were better or worse. And this is for the purpose of investment in whether or not they would loan money or give mortgages to certain people. Mm-hmm.
Were the redlinings the neighborhoods that were not good or the neighborhoods?
Well, I'll show you. I'll show you exactly how. So let's start though with green. If you look in this map, there are some green sections. And everything in quotation marks is their words, not the ones that we're summarizing with. So the green were the best neighborhoods. These were up and coming neighborhoods where professional men lived. And yes, that's in quotes because there weren't really professional women back in this time. The neighborhoods are explicitly homogenous, and it says they lacked a single foreigner or Negro, not one. So if you're going to have a best neighborhood, then there have to be 0 foreigners and 0 black people. Then the next level was blue. The blue neighborhoods were still desirable. These were neighborhoods that had reached their peak, but they were thought to be stable because there was a low risk of infiltration. Now think about that word, infiltration, as a way of talking about people moving into the neighborhood. Infiltration by non-white groups. The yellow neighborhoods were definitely declining. Most of the yellow neighborhoods bordered black neighborhoods, and by black I mean African American there. They were considered to be risky because of, look at this quote, the threat of infiltration of foreign-born, Negro, and lower-grade populations. And then now we get, Madeline, to the redlining. The red areas were hazardous. In a red neighborhood, infiltration had already occurred. They were almost completely populated by black residents, and because they were undesirable, they were not eligible for FHA backing. They could no, the government and most banks wouldn't give out mortgages. It was very hard to own a house. Mostly people would rent, and they were almost entirely low income black people. Okay, I want to show you now Richmond, Virginia's redlining map. This, in order to show you this will help me to know, does anyone in this room live in the city proper? Lois does. All right, I'll show you your house. Does anybody else live in the city? Madeline, your church is in the city. We might be able to find that.
Wait, is Bon Air in the city?
You're just outside. That's an interesting question because if you look, Bon Air is just outside. It's in the county, and so it was not affected by this. It was desirable for people who were leaving the city because of redlining. So this right here is your area where you live. Okay, let me first show you. Let me zoom in just a little bit and show you right here. This is the James River. Sorry, it keeps glitching. The James River goes right here. So to help you orient, you guys know Belle Isle. It's right here. So if you just did the Virginia War Memorial thing, we were right across here. On both sides, it was redlined. Does anybody know the area, the Nickel Bridge? This is Maymont right here on this side of the Nickel Bridge. It was in a blue area, and which was the second grade. It's just underneath green. And right across this green area is Westover Hills. Anybody know that area? Westover Hills neighborhood. So if you go up from that, this is 195 Powhite Parkway, and right here is close to where I live. This is where Willow Oaks Country Club is, and you'll notice it is definitely a green area. It was considered to be good housing, but where I live right here is just outside of it because my area at this time wasn't part of the city, which is actually part of the story of the area. We are now part of the city, but the laws have changed, and where you live, Blythe, right here, will never be part of the city because the city boundary is right about right here. And when it happened, it used to be that the city would just grow. Whenever there was more population, it would be like, now the city's growing. Now it's growing. Now we have more taxes. Now we have a healthy city. But when my area became part of the city, there was a big, crazy reaction to it because it was in the middle of desegregation. And these families didn't want their kids being bused across the river into these redlined neighborhoods for schools. So they got the law changed so that the city will never grow again. And that's why, Blythe, your area right here is never going to be part of the city. It'll always be Chesterfield County. And this area up here is always going to be Henrico County. It'll never become part of Richmond City. All right, so let's look at the areas I told you we would look at. This right here is the fan. Dad?
May I ask you a question?
What?
Is it still true in Virginia that a city this size, Richmond, is not a part of the county?
Yes,
That
Richmond
is separate.
City completely separates it from the county, and they're completely separate governments.
That's very unusual because
Mhm.
I live in a town that's a part of the county, but I pay taxes to the county and to the town.
Yeah, and
That's
we
usually
don't.
the way it is.
We have other, it's generally how it is, but this is part of the strangeness of the way Richmond has organized it. This area right here is, this yellow area is the fan. You guys know the fan? Sort of fans out like that. Mm-hmm. This right here is where the VMFA is and the Virginia History, which means if I zoom in, Madeline will find your church. Here. This is, I think it's right here. Do you know the cross street for your church? You're at Grove and I think it's right here.
I don't
Because this
remember
is the Confederate battlefield. This is where this
The
is
church.
this is where the museum is now. So you would be right here, I think, right around this area. So your church is in an area that was blue, a blue lined area. Did anyone else in here go to Veritas besides? Okay, so this will interest you guys if you went to Veritas. And this is also where Lois lives, so I could show you this. Do you see how this right here says Confederate, Wilmington, and then Palmyra? Veritas is right here. So it's in a green section, which doesn't surprise you if you know what the houses look like around there, right? They're amazing. And then that means right here, Lois, where you live on Maple Shade, is in the blue section that's close to it. So it was like not the best, but close to it, which makes sense because the houses are pretty nice around there, and you're sort of on the border of the city.
Where's Westminster?
So Westminster, actually, this shows us. It usually shows me with a dot where we are, but this is Tuckahoe right here, so we are right outside of it, across the Willie Bridge, right around here. We're in the county, in Henrico County right now.
We're near River Road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. We're kind of close to this area. Here's River Road. Are you in the city? No. So I can't find it. This is only redlined the cities themselves.
Okay, so only the cities are the red line, nowhere else was?
Yeah. So this is where the dense population was, and it was during this time that the suburbs developed, which is going to be in our slideshow. So let's keep going on that.
I mean, I never really lived in the suburbs. I guess it probably would have been just like nobody lived there.
Yes. All right, so let me show you this before we turn the lights back on because you're going to need to write something down. Here is a newspaper article from this time. Would you panic if a Negro moved next door? I'm broad-minded, said one homeowner when Negroes moved into his block, but a short time later he panicked and he sold his home at a loss. He sold it for less than he paid for it. In this week's post, you'll read how speculators decide which blocks are ripe for racial change, how they use vicious tactics to force out the whites, and how one speculator brags that he could bust your block in no time at all. All right, turn the lights on, Matt. Your next blank is, that we're filling in, is block busting. Block busting is when real estate speculators intentionally introduced a black family into a neighborhood and then stirred up fear because of their presence, driving the white families out. Let me explain this to you in my own words. This seems counterintuitive to you, but I'm going to show you how this was part of their racial policies. These were white people who wanted to flip a neighborhood in order to make money. And they would do this, let me explain the whole thing and then you can ask your question. They would do this by intentionally introducing a black family. How? Well, they could sell the house in this white neighborhood. They could sell it really cheap, or they could fund the house to help them get a mortgage or something like that. They could say, this is an awesome house, you should live here, it's going to be great, your kids will be at great schools. Whatever it was, they would get a black family to get into a white neighborhood and then start stirring up panic. People are like, oh wait, that means our neighborhood isn't going to be green anymore. It might be blue. And if it's blue, it might turn yellow. Yikes, we got to get out of here. We need to sell our house and we need to leave and we need to go to another area that's still green. And so when they did that, they couldn't sell their houses at the price that they had bought them at, so they would sell them low, and guess who bought them? The people that did that. They got the black family in there. They would buy up all the houses really cheap and then sell them back to the middle-class black families who wanted good houses, and they would sell them to all of them at a high price. And they would effectively flip the whole neighborhood from being a white neighborhood to a black neighborhood and make a ton of money off of it. Mm-hmm.
What would the timeline be for that? Because a lot of people people would have to sell their houses at the same time for the price to go
Right.
down that far, especially if it was
Yeah.
a green area.
So a speculator would have to have a long-term plan. Like maybe you do this over 10 years or something. You're not going to do it all really fast. But you're making like money all the time. So you can use the money to buy more houses and all that. Yes?
So there's this TV show called The Neighborhood that started back in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
It's a comedy, but it's about how this white family moved into a black neighborhood, and they're the only family that's white in this whole.
Is it supposed to be in 2018 or is it back during this
I'm
time?
pretty sure it's supposed to be during 2018 because
Okay.
that's when the show took place.
Okay. Well, keep it in mind and see if there's any like overlap with stuff. All right. Next blank right here is white flight. White flight. It goes in the blank. It's right up here. White flight is the departure of white people from places like urban neighborhoods or schools and that are predominantly populated by minorities. So, white flight is when these neighborhoods flip, like the one that I lived in. I told you it happened because the city grew, it took this area, people freaked out, and during the era of white flight, during desegregation when this happened, is when a lot of private schools started. Think about it. White flight in my neighborhood, when Mr. Doroko and I bought our house, we came into our neighborhood and we said, this is a great place to raise a family. Look, it's so diverse. All of our immediate neighbors are black, they're getting older, they have like college age kids, but there's young families down the way that are white, that are raising kids. Oh, this is cool, it's so diverse. And we had no idea until my brother, who's a history professor, told me that the reason this had happened is because the neighborhood had flipped when all the white families with school-age kids left the neighborhood and sold their houses to all the professional black families that were coming in. And that's why I saw this as this great diversity, but it actually was a history lesson in the making. It was like, this is what happened right here in our very own neighborhood. And then we moved back into the neighborhood. We didn't know we were part of something called gentrification, which is like young white people who were like, yay, the city's cool. We should live in the city. Because we did think the city was cool, and we loved being in the city, and we were homeschooling. We were like, what? The schools don't matter, blah, blah, blah. And then we ended up in this same situation where many of the people that are our peers don't send their kids to public schools. They homeschool or they send them to private schools. So you see, it's like, it's all history. It's all part of how Richmond, Virginia has organized itself around housing. And that affects the schools. And then that affects all this other stuff. So that's what white flight has done here. Which brings us to the next thing. Matt, flip the lights really fast so we can see this amazing Leave It to Beaver picture. Suburbanization, the American dream comes true. Isn't this like awesome? The mom is always in perfectly dressed. The kids always look like they're on their way to Sunday school or something. Okay, you can turn it back on. So your next blank is suburbanization. Suburbanization is the American dream come true. Yay! In a suburbanization, this is the picture of home ownership. That goes to the next blank. Ownership. Home ownership. Good schools. An area with low crime and a supportive family environment. Home ownership, good schools, low crime, and supportive family environment. Isn't this what every parent wants? Like, wouldn't it be awesome? You own your home, you're making investments in the future. You don't want a lot of crime in your neighborhood. You want good schools. Even if you're gonna homeschool your kids, you want there to be good schools in the area. It makes the value of your home better, at least. And you want supportive family environment. That's what everybody wants. But here's the problem: suburbanization was happened because of all these housing issues. So Okay, do most of you guys live in the suburbs, right?
Yes.
Raise your hand if you think you live in the suburbs.
I-
That means you don't live in the city and you don't live in the country on a farm or something.
Yep.
Mechanicsville, Hanover, and
E-
it's like starting to become more
starting to be
suburban.
rural. It's probably suburbs now.
What's the last?
Do you live near any like big box stores,
I don't know if that makes
chain stores?
We live like off of Freeway.
Like Walmart, Target.
Yes.
Yeah, if you live near that, you're in the suburbs. You are suburban. If you live near all that, yeah.
What was the last one?
Right here, family, supportive family environment. So the suburbs and the rise of the suburbs, like it's all great except this. If Madeline had asked about people like selling your home and then buying a new home. Selling and buying a new home is a fabulous way to get to have a better home or live where you want to live. But if you never owned the home, if you live in a low income area, if you rented, if you were in a redlined area, you can't sell it and buy something else. So you're not going to the suburbs. You're not going to go to this sort of environment. You're going to have to stay where you are. And that's how a lot of the city racial dynamics didn't change. They sort of stayed the same. So last blank here and there is that racial policies systematically excluded Black Americans from the benefits. All right, this brings us to my transition. It's so much better today. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. Thank you for the work on he worked on the air ducts to help us have air conditioning. Yay. All right, here's a picture of President Nixon enjoying his new suburban house, which is my transition here to the fact that President Nixon himself in 1971 declared a war on drugs. Nixon goes into that blank. Yes, Nixon.
Well, it says racial politics systematically exclude
Black Americans. Systematically exclude Black Americans. President Nixon declared a war on drugs. This is what he said. There's a problem in our nation. It's drugs. We've got to challenge it. We're going to have more police, more drug control agencies. We are going to do mandatory sentencing. Mandatory sentencing is like, if you're caught with drugs, you're going away for 10 years, 20 years. That's it. We're not even debating this. Not making plea deals. No-knock warrants is like, if we think you have drugs, we're coming into your house to search. We don't even have to get a warrant. Let me ask you a question. Do you think those no-knock warrants were used more in redlined or green neighborhoods? Right? So they're not going to be equally used. But it wasn't just Nixon. This President Reagan just upped the ante. Reagan is the next blank. President Reagan introduced zero-tolerance policies. And this is his wife, Nancy Reagan, who her sort of thing when he was in office was this fantastic solution to the drug problem. There is a drug problem in our world, and we are going to address it with this very important way. This is how you should keep yourself in. Just say no. Okay? Then there's no more drug problems because we're all going to just say no. So with the zero tolerance policies, what happened is that even a teenager caught with a little bit of marijuana is going to jail for a long time. So in America, in between when this started, 1980 and 2015, the number of people incarcerated in prisons went from 500,000 to 2.2 million people. Our nation is 5% of the world's population, but we have 21% of the people that are in prison are in our country. We have a really high rate of incarceration. It wasn't equally dispersed racially either, because, guys, you know, I don't know if you know this, you could say like, well, I think the Black neighborhoods, maybe they have more crime. The truth is, every statistics that's ever been run shows white teenagers and Black teenagers use drugs at the same rate. But they're not arrested and put in prison at the same rate. Their use is the same, but not their incarceration. There's a lot of disparity between how it's applied. Now, I will also say that white teenagers that are from wealthy families tend to use different kinds of drugs, rich kid drugs, but that doesn't mean they're not using drugs. They're just not suffering the effects of incarceration. You end up in jail, guess what? You're going to have a really hard time getting a job later. It's really going to wreck your life. And if you are instead a 16-year-old from a wealthy neighborhood and the police are like, look, we know you're a teenager, we know you make mistakes, your dad has a good lawyer, you can do, okay, we'll let you off. Versus somebody that's like, we are going to make sure this nation is cleaned up, and we're going to make sure that we make it so hard to get in trouble that basically ends up with a lot of people in prison. In Virginia itself, this is our own map of incarceration in Virginia. The dark blue, there's more incarcerations, the light blue, but the one I really wanted to show you is over here. Most of you guys know, near Carytown, there's a neighborhood called Windsor Farms.
Yes.
This is where H-Croft Hall is. You guys remember how nice the houses are there?
Wait, H-Croft?
H-Croft Hall, Virginia House, they're all back in there. Really, they're all brick, they're really beautiful houses. In Windsor Farms, the incarceration rate is 0. No incarceration. In nearby Gilpin, the incarceration rate is 2,495 per 100,000. It has a really high incarceration rate. Now, yes, there is probably more crime here for a myriad of reasons. But is it possible that there are no teenagers in Windsor Farms ever that are using drugs or drinking illegally or doing anything like that?
Well,
No. Not a chance, Ben Hawkins.
no, I wasn't gonna say that. I recall, but it's fine.
Yeah. So I want to close by saying this. Where people live, where people go to school, who they know and their opportunities, and whether they end up incarcerated or having opportunities of life, this right here, it was incarceration, was that last one. This right here is an issue that Christians should care about. Justice being done, and should care about working to bring about justice. That is what we pray when we say, your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, is caring about justice.